Uh, well, I want to welcome everyone. We still have 4 people who have accepted the meeting but have not attended, are not in the meeting. I did send them e-bikes, WebEx invitation, so we'll see if they show up. But why don't we go ahead and my name's Lynn Schroeder. I'm the project coordinator. Chris Myers, the project manager, is out ill today. So why don't we go around the room, starting with Councilor Bright.
I'm Carol Breik. I'm on the Westwood City Council, and I'm the liaison to this working group.
Spencer Crandall, fairly new resident to Westland, like 3 years ago, business consultant, and the chair of the group after Tanner Woody.
Mary Carlson, Robinwood resident and member of the Robinwood Neighborhood Association, which have minutes. I do have minutes that address this group if you are interested in hearing this.
Dawn Meany, and I'm a Robinwood also resident and representative here, and then also a realtor, local realtor.
Hey everyone, Steve Cooper. I'm the Community Development Director for the city, relatively new here, just been here a little bit over 3 months.
And I'm Victoria Manig. I'm the Executive Director for the Westland Chamber of Commerce.
Matt Hasty with MIG.
Brandon Crawford.
And Bo, I see you came online. Do you want to say hi?
Hi everyone, Bo Gino, resident Westland.
Okay, thank you. All right, we do have a copy of the agenda for people, but I will turn it over to Matt. No, to Spencer, we have
Oh yeah, we have
another welcome.
Hey. Oh, introduce yourself.
Rob Henderson, Robinwood Neighborhood.
Thank you. We need to approve the previous agenda first, correct? Or previous minutes is what I mean. Which, I don't know, did people read them over? And I read them over. I approved them. Okay, so we're good on that?
Anybody have any changes? We missed anything?
Yeah, any changes to the previous meeting minute?
Nope.
No. Okay. So then now we're ready for the project status update here.
All right. For the lights of that?
Yeah.
Down at the bottom here, at the little center bar.
It looks like a little screen like on an easel.
To the left. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Okay.
And go to the next one.
Weird, it's not behaving for you.
There
I
we
can
go.
see that.
And this you have on your agenda. I won't go over this.
Yeah.
But we'll start with the project status. So go ahead and click again. All right. So just kind of where we are in the project. So I'm going to start out and do kind of the first part of the presentation here. Just give us an update on where we are in the project. And then Brandon will kind of lead us through a discussion of some of the particularly development code standards that we want to get some feedback from you on today. So we have been working on a new draft section for the development code, a mixed use chapter that would apply to certain portions of these kind of focus areas that we've been talking about. We'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of where they would apply and for the moment, and then where they might get expanded into in the future. So we've been working on that. We've incorporated feedback from you all. We've had more review with staff. We've gotten comments from the Planning Commission and City Council. So we've been incorporating all that into an updated draft of that mixed use zoning code chapter. We found that we're going to need some more time to finish this project up. So the the project's been extended through this coming winter and spring. So with an adoption anticipated by about May or April or May of 2026. So we've kind of got that timeline laid out, but it is taking us a little longer to finish up. And we are also looking at, as part of adopting the corridor plan, also adopting and applying this mixed use zone again in specific areas within the corridor. Beyond May 2026, the city will look at potentially updating zoning in the larger areas around some of the areas I'm going to show you today. So kind of a two-phased approach to the rezoning of these areas. Because the focus areas are fairly large. They include kind of a mix of properties and a mix of uses. And so the focus initially on rezoning is going to be really on those properties that are directly adjacent to.
And I feel like it looks like we're taking longer, but I really don't think we are, because if we do the zoning at the same time that we're going to be approving the vision plan, then once that's approved, the zoning will already be changed. So anybody that comes in to do any development at that point will be under the new zoning. So I don't think it's going to really delay any action. And if we approve the plan now, people could jump in and try to do development on the old code between now and when the plan's approved.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of times in these processes, these planning processes, the plan's developed first, adopted, and then move into the update of the zoning. And in this project, we're doing them as part of the same larger process. So yeah, really good point.
I do want to make a caveat. This isn't going to change any current application.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything that's in now or has come in recently or comes in before the zoning, the new zoning is adopted will be, reviewed per the existing zoning. So that's important to know. Yeah. And then the other thing that we've done recently is what's called a transportation planning rule analysis. So this is going to get pretty wonky, but I'll try to just sort of fairly briefly describe it. So when a city is proposing to update its zoning, rezone an area from one zoning designation to another zoning designation, they have to do what's called a transportation planning rule analysis of the impact of the new zoning on the transportation system, and particularly on any state-owned or state-managed transportation facilities. So in this case, we've got Highway 43 as a state facility. We've also got I-205 nearby. And so as part of rezoning these properties, we need to look at how is that rezoning going to impact the performance of those facilities. So I can't remember, do we have another slide that sort of talks about this in more detail? No, okay, so I'll talk about it again in a little tiny bit of detail now and just see if you have any questions about it. But what that analysis does is that it looks at a reasonable worst case scenario under the existing zoning for development, and then looks at a reasonable worst case scenario under the future zoning, and looks at the impacts on the transportation facilities in both those cases, and determines whether or not the proposed new zoning is going to have what's called a significant impact on the function of the facility, the performance of the facility, and whether or not any projects are anticipated to be needed to mitigate or reduce those impacts. So again, gets pretty wonky. And I'll say that in this case, what we looked at in terms of that reasonable worst case scenario under both conditions was if some of these properties were to be redeveloped or developed over the next 15 years, how many more traffic trips would they generate? We didn't assume the entire area gets just scraped off and rebuilt. We said, hey, in the next 10 or 15 years, there's already some uses there that are pretty likely to stay. Some of these properties will be, we would expect, redeveloped. Not everything, because we're thinking about this as, a 50-year vision, not a 15-year vision. But we did think about over the next 15 years, what's sort of reasonable to expect? Again, kind of reasonable worst case. The overall findings of the analysis was that it would not have a significant impact on the performance or function of those facilities. to the point where projects would be needed to mitigate the impacts. So there will be an increase in trips. There's no question. There will be an increase. There's anticipated to be an increase in trips, but not to the point, or in traffic, but not to the point where you need to go out and put in new traffic signals or do things, or widen the road or do things of that nature that aren't already planned within the city's transportation plan.
Okay.
So,
So I just want to
that's
pause
my-
on that and just, because that's a lot of the comments we get is, oh my gosh, traffic, but this TPR analysis is showing us that we're not gonna max out the road.
that's a good way to put it.
Well, this won't cause a max out of the road. What will is further development in Oregon City and beyond where people are driving to.
Oh, yeah, that's beyond our control.
Which is beyond our control, like.
And this does look at, when it's projecting traffic ahead 15 years, it's looking at both the background and through traffic as well as the impact of this development. So it's kind of taking into account both types of traffic. But yeah, it is saying that development per what we're proposing in this new zone isn't gonna, as somebody just said, max out the road.
Yeah.
And,
So-
and certainly one of the hopes is that people can maybe drive somewhere and then do multiple
Right.
things there and then drive out, which would actually probably reduce traffic to an extent, instead of driving here, doing this, and then driving over here and doing this, and then driving over here.
And there are some assumptions in the analysis about additional kind of internal trips, right? That people will be able to get a certain amount of their needs met within the corridor as opposed to leaving it or traveling, a short distance along it or whatever it might be. So some assumptions along those lines. And like there's one other thing I was going to say. Oh, there's also some recommendations about, okay, this is the analysis that we've got today, but it doesn't mean the city and the state shouldn't continue monitoring the impacts of development in this area. And anytime somebody comes in to propose a development that's larger than a certain size, they're going to have to do an traffic impact analysis for that development and identify the impacts associated with it and potentially make improvements to the roadway to deal with those impacts. So there's other things in place, but this
So
is
right now
kind
you're
of
doing it saying kind of what if, and then
Yeah.
when a specific project comes in,
they need to
that,
look at that.
that is reiterated.
Yeah, so that was a lot of talking about that one bullet there. So, I wanted to give you a sense of
Big
like,
bullet.
when we say, yeah, we talk about this is what we mean.
Well, does that include like bicycle lanes and all that kind of stuff that comes with doing more internal?
So the kind of long-term plan for Highway 43 does include improvements to bicycle and pedestrian facilities along the highway. It does, yeah. And then in your transportation system plan, as well as that plan, as well as this plan, identifies recommended pedestrian crossings as well. We identified some additional ones in this plan that will be added to your overall citywide transportation system plan. So those will need to go through a process, with ODOT to approve those, but those are being proposed too. We've got kind of a whole set of recommended bicycle and pedestrian improvements as part of this plan as well.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How are you able to project no impact when we don't have information as to what businesses? Do you just assume a certain?
We make some assumptions. So, and again, I wouldn't say no impact. There will be an impact, but not a significant enough impact that it really degrades the performance of the road or requires additional improvements to reduce or mitigate the impact. So I just want to be clear. It's not no impact, but the way we do the analysis, and when I say we have a partner on this team called Kittleson and Associates. They're a transportation analysis and engineering firm. And so we work with them to say, here's what's allowed under this new zoning. It allows for a variety of different types of development. It allows for housing, for commercial development, et cetera. It allows for buildings to be a certain height. It allows for a certain amount of lots to be covered with businesses or housing. So we make some assumptions about what that means in terms of square footage of development of different types, housing and commercial or retail or those types of uses. And then again, we took a look at which properties do we expect realistically would be redeveloped in the time period we're looking at. So we made some projections related to that. And then we apply to those properties these assumptions about the amount and mix and type of development and scale of development. And then that gets turned into trips, traffic trips, resulting from that development. And that gets then added to the system. And that's how we do it.
If I'm to assume this is also kind of how it works, we already have so many people traveling back and forth down Highway 43. What we're trying to do now is capture them as rather than pass-through users. We're trying to capture them as stopping and spending money, or, you know, we only have to go this far rather than go to Oregon City to do something, versus say turning Cedar Oak into a shopping mall. That would completely change the amount of traffic that goes up and down Cedar Oak from what it currently is. So the traffic that goes up and down 43 isn't necessarily going to be more, because we're not really trying to bring more people in. We're just trying to capture those people who are passing through.
I mean, it's kind of a combination. We are expecting there to be more people because we're allowing for housing in areas that don't allow for housing now. More people living there, and those people are going to, you know, on the highway. But it's kind of a mix, yeah.
But
The
again, we might not have
expectation
to
or
go to
assumption
LO or to Oregon City for a service or a thing.
Right.
You can get it locally.
Yeah.
And it's not a forest, it's already a commercial zone,
Yeah.
Right.
most of it.
Yeah.
So it's
And that's the
already,
other
it's not
thing.
like a drastic change.
Exactly. What's allowed now and what would be allowed in the future aren't drastically different in terms of the amount of development. But there are some differences because we are proposing some changes with standards that would allow for a different mix of things to be built and a different scale in some places. So, yeah.
Great. Any more questions on this project status? Okay,
All right.
because we should go into the, key revisions to the draft code is kind of
Yeah.
next? Okay.
So we've made a number of changes to what we're proposing. The one, again, is to kind of focus in the areas that are proposed to be rezoned initially. So that's what the phase one rezoning is. The blue outlines are a little bit hard to see if you move your head in the right direction. You can kind of see them. But the red outline is kind of the entire focus area. The blue dashed outline is what's proposed to be rezoned as part of this process. So it really does focus primarily on those properties that are commercially zoned, that are along Highway 43, directly adjacent to Highway 43, that currently have commercial zoning or currently have some kind of commercial use. So you remember in previous meetings, we looked at these maps and we kind of expanded in some cases the boundary of the focus areas. And we are not changing those. We're not proposing to make changes to those larger focus area boundaries, but we are proposing to make some changes to how much of those get rezoned in this initial kind of path.
Phase one.
Zoning, in phase one. So
Okay.
phase one is sort of
Okay.
what's happening as part of this process.
Mhm.
And the expectation is there would be a phase two that would look at rezoning of the rest of the area within each of these. But that zoning might look a little different. You know, it might not allow buildings to be quite as tall. It might require more transitions. It might not have as strict requirements about design or uses in certain areas. It was probably going to be a little more flexible and a little more, let's say, transitional. But we're going to hold off on that part so that there can be more community conversations about the rezoning of those areas. And for this phase, really just focus on those smaller areas within the focus areas. So that's a fairly significant change since we last talked to you. When we last talked to you, the proposal was to do the rezoning for the entire focus area. So we kind of ratcheted the rezoning back a little bit.
You don't want to shock people.
I mean, not too much.
Yeah.
Maybe a little. But
Yeah, get it.
yeah, I mean, we don't want to do something that seems really like it might be over the top for folks.
And I think in a previous meeting, we talked about having like subzones. And so the phase one would be like the primary mixed use kind of zoning. And then phase two could be a subzone that would
Yeah.
maybe allow for fewer uses or lower heights or different things like that. And so we can create that
Right.
mixed use zone on those shoulder areas a little bit differently.
Yeah, it kind of lays the foundation for taking that zone approach down the line. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And it kind of, yeah. So for the moment, then the zoning that's in those areas would remain what it is, now, um, after this, as the phase one rezoning
which
takes
is
place.
primarily residential.
So there's a few other things we have recommended as part of the revisions to the draft code that we've been making. One is to both add some allowed uses and also add some prohibited uses that, as folks looked at the code, they said, well, what about these types of uses? Don't we maybe want to allow these? And what about these other ones? Maybe we don't want to allow these. So examples, allowing community and civic centers in this area, that wasn't in the list of allowed uses previously. So that was one we added. Prohibiting firearm ranges and hazardous waste storage. Those weren't listed as prohibited uses before. Maybe they should have been, but they weren't. So we have added those as prohibited uses. We had talked previously about requiring kind of almost all parking to be behind the buildings. We are proposing that it be allowed next to buildings, that a certain percentage of the site next to the building could be used for parking. You still wouldn't allow it between essentially the sidewalk and the front of the building. We don't want to create that barrier to people getting in and out of buildings along the highway, but that some parking could be on the side of the building. Again, there'd be sort of a limit to the percentage of the frontage of the site where there was parking on the side, and there would be requirements for landscaping and buffering between the sidewalk and the parking area. So you're not like, have a car right there at the front of the sidewalk. You've got some landscaping to kind of soften those edges and buffer pedestrians. We also have some exceptions to the setback requirements that allow for courtyards, plazas, gathering spaces, essentially pedestrian or other pedestrian amenities, seating, et cetera. So that because we have some proposed requirements that, particularly along the highway, that buildings come up pretty close to the sidewalk. But that if you want to put some things that are amenities for pedestrians in those spaces and allow the buildings to be a little farther back, that's okay. So we added that. And then we had talked about potentially having a minimum building height of at least 2 stories, I think. When we talked to you previously, we had some discussion with folks on our technical advisory committee about that. They recommended rather than using a minimum building height, that we establish instead what's called a minimum floor area ratio that would be applied across a development or across a site and would allow a little more flexibility in varying the height of buildings. Floor area ratio, this little diagram down here kind of shows you what that means. It's basically the ratio of the square footage of a building, all floors of it, divided by the square footage of the entire site. That's what floor area ratio means. And so we're proposing to use that to try to get at, hey, we do want to see, not just a minimum amount of these sites developed. We want to see a certain amount of development occur. But we were concerned, and other folks on our advisory committee were concerned about the impact of requiring a minimum number of stories of development. That might be a challenge, particularly in some sites for development. So that's one. And then the last one, and we had talked about this one earlier, but applying a minimum housing density where there is going to be residential development proposed, saying, well, that needs to be like not just individual homes in these new areas, but at a scale where you're building at least a townhome, or apartments or something like that, something that's a little denser and can accommodate more people. Now, we heard from, I think, members of this group previously that can be problematic on smaller sites, and we heard that from some of our technical advisory committee members too. So that there would be a threshold, like on things under a half acre, we wouldn't apply those minimum housing densities because it can be challenging to get that on smaller sites. It would apply to larger developments. So, yes. Do you have a question?
So, well, I was thinking about the FAR. So if you want to finish on the density, I don't want to.
That's pretty much all I was going to say. I was just going to ask Brandon or Lynn if they had anything to add to what I just said about all this, because I went through it pretty quickly.
Yeah, we didn't set a FAR, I don't think.
We have, I think we have in the draft code, I can't remember if we have a range. I don't know if we've established what it is, but I think we've got a placeholder.
Yeah, specifically for the properties that are directly on 43.
I mean, we will have to have one, and I think we've got a placeholder one.
So,
But otherwise, did I
Yeah.
capture what we've been doing?
Yeah.
in this life?
so just so I understand the FAR, like it sort of means that someone could, as long as they filled up X percentage of the lot, let's say 90% of the lot or whatever, they could just be a one-story building or whatever
Yeah,
that.
it does-
It kind of works like that, where it's a percentage,
Yeah, exactly. It is, and it's sort of
and then it
pushing
starts
them
to
to build.
shrink as they shrink the
Yeah,
dimensions. It makes them go up,
go up.
right?
It's sort of pushing them to develop more than a single story building across an entire site or across an entire development, because there's always going to be a portion of the development that doesn't have a building on it because it's going to have parking, it's going to have landscaping, it's going to have other things.
Mhm.
But it is sort of pushing towards more than single story development, but it's allowing for some portion of the site to be single story or to be 2 story or whatever. So it kind of provides a little more variability or flexibility.
But other parts of the code would dictate, like, that they have to have those setbacks and different things
Mhm.
anyway, so it would
Yeah.
sort of like fit within the character.
Yeah.
Okay,
But another
because those have to work together.
the minimum
Yeah.
FAR would exceed the lot coverage.
Yes. Well, we're not proposing a maximum lot coverage
Okay, I thought
in
there was.
this code. No, there's not. So not at the moment. Yeah, that one we had a fair bit of discussion about previously. And because really a lot of other things are going to drive lot coverage, we did not think a minimum lot or a maximum lot coverage was necessary, because you're going to have parking, landscaping, setbacks, et cetera. They're really going to result in a certain lot coverage. And frankly, the development that's occurred now up to this point and likely in the future probably wouldn't hit the maximum lot coverage anyway, just because of all those other factors. That was our estimation.
Yeah, so our current recommendation in the current draft is FAR of 1, so that means minimum floor area building should be at least the amount of area of the site.
Right.
So that just provides.
Which means you have to have at least 2 stories, at least in part of it.
At least in part of it,
Yeah.
exactly. At least a portion of the development would have to have 2 stories. Yeah, to
There's
get you there.
Setbacks and minimum.
But
Got it.
but
Okay.
you're not requiring that every bit of it has 2 stories. That's why I say it gives a little more
Okay.
flexibility.
And when the city council was looking at some of the examples of redevelopment, like in Lake Oswego, and this is where it gets tricky with mixed use, we saw something on Boone's Ferry that was like office, like professional offices, dentists and stuff like that, right on Boone's Ferry. And then across the parking lot were townhomes. And so it was mixed use on the lot, but it wasn't mixed use on every building.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it was a mix of building height.
Yeah.
In those examples.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you retained the previous prohibitions that we had
Yeah.
discussed? Do you recall what was included? Because I thought it was like storage units.
Yep, those
Yeah,
are
they're
still-
all in the.
Yeah, those are
this
still
one.
prohibited. Yeah.
Oh.
So
These are just the
these are just
changes.
Yeah, no, I know. I
But yeah,
understand
but
that.
yes, we did retain the things that
You
were
want to see that?
previously prohibited or still prohibited.
I don't.
I was just gonna clarify or add that what we had on there was drive-through uses, car washes, personal storage, automotive repair, and then we added the firearm ranges and hazardous waste storage.
This other piece, I don't know why I didn't see this before, and I can't remember the discussion, but about the manufacturing or repackaging of goods
Mm-hmm.
not to exceed 5,000 square feet. Is that the entire building, or is that just one
That would
story?
be the use. Yeah.
Entire building?
The use, I said? Yeah, not necessarily the entire building.
Oh, like the leased space.
Yeah, basically
Yeah.
the portion of the space that was devoted to that use.
Gotcha. Right. So
So you could have like a customer facing part in the front and that in the back, but maxed out.
Oh, gotcha. You could have 5,000 square feet of manufacturing and 2,000 square foot of retail in the front, and you're all good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is like a bar, like a brewery where you could have.
Could be you're producing beer, you're got some kind of maker space, you're
Yeah.
maybe making jewelry.
Commissary
whatever it is
kitchen
you're
with
doing.
selling bakery stuff. Okay, cool. That seems reasonable.
Any other questions or comments on any of this stuff that I just went through? And then we're gonna, I think the next set of slides, we're gonna talk about some other code issues and ask you some questions. But, all right. Let's see. Oh, we got one more that just sort of talked about some of the revisions we've made. So one of the other things we did in terms of updating this this part of this code was to limit the maximum height to 35 feet within 30 feet of a residential zone, so that we've got some transition between those areas and the allowed height being higher. Because generally we're allowing up to, I think, 45 feet, right? Yeah. So, but within 30 feet of a residential zone, got to step down, or it's got to be not higher than 35 feet. So that was another change. And then we also added a number of design standards that relate to the design of the buildings themselves, sort of architectural design standards. And they're architectural design and also site design standards in terms of requiring walkways or pathways within a development, things of that nature. The state passed legislation a couple of years ago called the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities bill. I can't remember, but it was, I don't know if it was a House bill or a House or Senate bill. I think it was House. And then subsequent to that, the state adopted a set of more specific requirements related to that. It actually flows into a bunch of places, but we're focused here on they adopted some model code and some specific administrative rules that in certain areas and certain parts of the certain communities around the state, cities need to abide by these in terms of their standards for development. And they really kind of relate to improving both aesthetics, but also just walkability of an area. So a lot of them have to do with, creating development that's easier for people to get to and walk around in, frankly.
And one of the areas is along transit, so all up and down Highway 43 is
Exactly.
included in the requirement, and the council has passed that so that it's part of the city code.
So we looked at those standards as we develop design standards and development standards for this new mixed use stuff. So we kind of looked at that as a model because it's kind of gone through this statewide vetting process that's being used. And we've been using it in a number of other communities. So we've had a fair number of discussions with folks about these standards. So that's kind of the baseline. There are some other standards. We recommended some standards around variation in the roof line. And so you kind of, and I'm going to note this graphic in the bottom. We've been doing some graphics that are kind of future visualization graphics. So they basically reflect the standards that we've identified to date, and they reflect the sort of size and scale of buildings that could be built under this new code. So we also have some graphics that show sort of the size and scale of what you could build today, and they show what's on the ground today, and then they show what this could look like in the future. So that's what one of those graphics is down below.
I have a thought about design standards. And so even with reducing the height to 35 feet, can we put something in the code so that this new development is off of my backyard and I'm looking at a 35-foot tall concrete slab back of a building with no architectural interest or anything else? I don't think any of the people in the in the residential areas adjacent to this are going to want that. I know we had an issue where there was a proposal for a storage facility on Highway 43 years ago, like when my husband and I first moved here, and their design was anybody that lived next to it had like a 35-foot tall, basically gray or tan concrete slab building.
Yeah.
You know, overshadowing their backyard.
That's a really good
So-
question. I think we certainly could. Yes, I mean, we could include those kind of standards or requirements. I think at this point, a lot of these standards are geared toward the kind of street-facing facade of buildings, primarily the street-facing facade along 43. And so they don't necessarily require that kind of variability in the facade, the face of the building on the backside. But that's not to say we couldn't have some standards for that too. We would probably, if we are going to do that, we might have sort of a like dial back the standards a little bit compared to what you have along the highway, but still require a certain amount of variation in the facade. And we could require, a certain amount of window reglazing percentage, things like that. So I think that's a good question. I
Do you
don't.
rather have windows looking into your backyard or a wall?
Well, they could even be fake windows. I don't care. I just think,
You just want a big blank wall
yeah,
that doesn't have any variation in
Yeah, I
the.
just think we'd have to be
surface
careful
of it.
about that a little bit. 'Cause
Yeah.
I would rather have a blank wall that I can plant against than windows.
Yeah.
People
in.
looking in.
Yeah.
I'll add that we do have some architecture standards in here around windows and articulation that actually do apply to every facade.
Okay.
So that can include like things like porches, balconies, articulation, building face. So it isn't just one big blank wall. Then we also have minimum window percentage requirement of 20% of each facade. Yeah, that can include fake windows again, but just basic intent is to prevent that big.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I should have just asked Brandon.
Yeah, he had the, well, he needed time to look it up.
That's what, sometimes I speak to give you
Stuff up here.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. So yeah, good question, better answer than my answer. We also allow in the code for some design exceptions or alternatives subject to planning director approval. So we've got some pretty specific standards. The goal of a lot of these standards, especially if they apply to residential development, they need to be what's called clear and objective standards. So that's really important. But if somebody wants, if a development application wants to be subject to a more discretionary standard or have some more flexibility, they can choose to do that. So we added some provisions in here that allow for that. But you have to give somebody a clear and objective path forward if they're building housing. So that's really important. So any other questions or thoughts on this bit of stuff? Does that make sense generally? Okay. Next one. Lynn, can you
Go to the next
go to
one.
Oh, sorry.
All right, now we're gonna do some talking and ask you some questions and get your feedback on some things. So some of these issues we've talked about with you a little bit before, and we want to take your pulse again. And some of them are things we haven't talked about before. So we want to get a sense of what you're thinking to help us move forward, with refining the plans further. So ground floor commercial requirements, this is something that we've talked about previously, and I think generally what we heard from y'all was it's a good idea to do that along Highway 43, but we want to kind of ask the question again. The previous recommendation was that we require that a minimum of 50% of the buildings that front Highway 43 be non-residential on the ground floor. They could have housing above. The other 50% could be housing on the ground floor. So we want to find out, does that still make sense, or would you advocate for something less or more or zero? The discussion we've had around this, can I keep going?
Yeah.
I could tell.
I feel Lynn, I heard the noise.
Yeah. So just kind of pros and cons of requiring some percentage, and it doesn't have to be 50%. Could be lower, could be higher. One is that right now these areas are zoned for commercial use. We are allowing mixed use, so we're allowing a combination of commercial and non-commercial or housing or residential uses. So if we were to not have any requirement, that would mean that these areas could be built for purely residential use. So by having a minimum requirement, we're making sure that we retain some of the supply of land for commercial use. So that's one of the pros. We heard from folks, in particularly the meetings we had early in this process, that there was some strong support for mixed use. People thought housing was important, but when we showed them pictures of things, they really liked the mixed use types of buildings, and it just kind of avoids pure kind of standalone residential development along Highway 43 in these areas. It would still allow for some, but
Can you expand on why that's a pro as opposed to a neutral statement?
Because again, this area has commercial zoning now. It's the whole sort of goal of this process has been to create a mixed use corridor. And so if it's a purely residential corridor, it's not a mixed use corridor anymore. It's a residential corridor. So I would say avoiding a pure residential corridor is a problem. That's how I see it anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then we have heard there's a limited demand for retail or commercial development along the highway, so maybe just don't require any. I mean, that would be a kind of a con of requiring some. It does reduce development flexibility to a degree. It could create oversupply of commercial space, which could lead to, especially if we set the percentage too high and there's not a market for that much commercial space, then you're going to result in potentially vacant uses along the highway. So I think it is important to sort of think about, if we're going to require a percentage, what's the right percentage? So those are the pros and cons. What do you think?
I've got input,
Yeah.
because I always do. I would say it would go back to the design concept of everything, that if somebody does do residential all the way down to the street level, that first floor have to have a certain type of stone or a certain type of brick or certain.
Sure.
So it has a very substantial look to it.
Okay.
The other thing that I would do is maybe have that flexibility where, like they've done this in like Oswego, where that first floor opens to a courtyard. It's that bottom level could be used as a professional office.
Mm-hmm.
However, if somebody does not have a professional office, they can, it's attached to their living space, but it has that space that could go either way. I think that's kind of a way to get around this. Should it be this? Should it be this? But as far as continuity, we really want this to be a beautification project too. And we want things to have a uniformity. So if you have lap siding all the way down to the ground, and then you have a commercial building and then lap siding, it just is going to throw it off. So I think there should be something in design that if you do go and allow residential all the way down to ground floor, it needs to have a substantial build on that first floor.
Got it. Okay.
I saw something when I was in Missoula, Montana, several months ago, and it has on the first floor bottom is a place called Grist, and they grind their own meal. They do coffee and breakfast things in the morning. They do sandwiches at lunch. Above that is a architectural / construction firm. And then attached to it, and I've got a picture of it here, are townhouses, like five or six townhouses attached to it. And
Right,
anyway,
it's like a little tiny neighborhood, like
yeah,
a mini neighborhood or
and
whatever.
I just thought it was kind of cool. And then there's an alley behind it, which is also wonderful, with garages and carports for these residents. So the townhouses are like 3 stories tall. They've got some nice little landscaping in the front. I don't know if I can make it.
So you could say in that case, like 25% of the area maybe is commercial
Yeah.
and the rest of it's residential.
And so the doors are like kind of step back a little bit. You walk up and they've got landscaping. Anyway, it just was a really nice looking thing. And it made me think differently about mixed use, where you've got that kind of corner market thing, and then have the housing adjacent to it. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about. If we have a percentage that's required as commercial, you could still have ground floor residential.
So my question is just how much can this be sustained over a whole corridor? Is there that much demand in all our focus area for this level of of mixed use? I mean, should it be that there's allowed some commercial only and some housing only, so we actually um, fill in, have more,
Yeah.
more energy around everything. Um,
You're always trying to stump me. I don't know, and I wouldn't say it's across the whole corridor. I guess you can think of it as across the whole corridor. I mean, we're focused on these specific areas, right? So there is a lot of the corridor that's going to remain just residentially zoned. It's really these few.
And we're
that are going to remain single family, single family
Yeah.
zone.
And so I guess we haven't done a market analysis or study to say this is exactly, and even if we did, it would tell us what you could accommodate today, not in the next 50 years. That's a pretty hard question, I think, to answer in terms of thinking long term about, again, what's the right number. That's why it is a hard number to come up with. So that's a long way of saying, I don't know. It's a great question, but I don't know that I know that.
I think to Dawn's comment about like maker spaces, when I went to the League of Oregon Cities that was in Portland, I took a tour in Gresham. And they have an area that was apartment buildings. There's a nice coffee shop on the corner, apartments, 5-story. I mean, this is like a 75-foot tall building. It did not feel like it was closing in on me at all. But they had maker spaces on the bottom. And I'm used to seeing maker spaces like, in downtown, they've got like the lofts or whatever, Everett Street loft, where you have your open to the public kind of space and then you live above. In this case, the maker spaces had the public facing business, and then behind it was the living quarters, and then all above were like 4 floors of apartments, and they had a nice little rooftop gathering space, and it was just really, really cool. And I believe that all of the maker spaces were full, but it was like an accountant's office and things like that.
Yeah, and this code would not have to require that the full depth of the ground floor be commercial, really more what faces the street. So it would allow for that kind of thing with some residential on the backside on the ground floor.
And this is for a single development, not like a amount of length, right?
This would be for a single development, but what we talked about before was for the ground floor street facing portion of that single development, that a certain percentage of it be devoted to non-residential.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, like, if someone else then developed next door, now they reset and now they're looking at 50% of their property.
Yeah, or whatever the number is. Yeah, so we're trying to get a sense of, is it still a good idea to require a certain amount? And if we think it's a good idea to require a certain amount of it, be not housing on the ground floor, does anybody have any thoughts about a number that's different than 50%?
And when we see, particularly in Robinwood, businesses going out of business, then maybe 50% is maybe a little too high.
Yeah.
Steve,
And I would, go ahead, please.
sorry, but same concern, and yeah, and I guess I have your question as well, or I share your question as well, Lynn. Like, how much can we support when Backyard Burger has folded, Bugatti has folded, and I don't know. In talking to the manager at Starbucks, he said, "Yeah, there's just no traffic. I'm walking," and he was surprised to see that I was walking on Highway 4. What are you doing? Walking up 63. So without an analysis of like, why are these businesses folding, I would think it'd be hard to establish a percentage.
Yeah, I think that my comment echoes that, and that's why I asked the question about the standalone multifamily, because I mean, my observation in the corridors is that it's a problem of the lack of rooftops, that there aren't enough residents in the corridor to sustain the existing businesses. And given the fact that there are some relatively successful commercial businesses, I guess I don't necessarily see there being a very high likelihood, even if you allowed zoning for residential, that if you took a parcel that is underdeveloped or marginal currently and you put a multifamily on that, all that would do is that would make that commercial parcel next door more valuable as commercial, not make them likely to turn it into residential.
Yeah, could be.
And so the thing I think is that, like, having this corridor, I just am thinking to myself, like, where will someone do a mixed use development as the very first development in this corridor? And that to me, I think is, I can't I just can't think of a single parcel that would be the case for. And so I think setting a code that requires that is dangerous.
A strong word.
It is. A strong word.
That is a strong word.
Yeah.
Because I go the other way, and I think if we don't develop enough commercial to bring people in and provide resources for people who live there, I mean, that's what we're trying to do is fix that,
I mean,
right?
yeah,
When I sell to young people, and that's really what we want to appeal to is young people. We want to appeal to even retirees. Portland was built on tiny little micro communities. It used to be that Selwood had its own bank, it had its own hardware store, it had its own this. Brooklyn had the same thing. All these places have the same thing. We're seeing this huge push in downtown Willamette right now with the garage. Is that garage little development
Yeah.
has revitalized
Yeah.
seriously Willamette. Like everybody's down at their gathering. Having places like that are important. My daughter's 28. She lives on 14th and Fremont. She's back home with me now. She says, I hate Westland. I hate Westland. I can't wait to get back to Northeast because we're going to build an ADU over the garage, blah, blah. She loves being able to walk places. And if there's no place to walk, I mean, did anybody think that Division would look like Division looks now?
No.
Or any
sure.
of the inner city, like anything close in? And my face is that right because I'm not a public speaker. But
No, this is good.
but seriously,
Yeah.
it's kind of that chicken or the egg. Like we want to bring these young people back in, but what are they coming here for? And then the secondary thing is all these little clustered cottages. I'm talking to developers who are having the hardest time selling these little cluster cabins because it's geared to, I mean, to buy a $400,000 house is still a $3,000 a month payment for something without a garage or anything else. Our young people are going to keep renting. We're just going to keep renting. And it's this weird kind of thing. Who is our market? Who are we doing this for? So,
John, I asked my 28-year-old son, who
Yeah.
went to school with your daughter.
Yeah.
I asked him what would make somebody your age, he lives in San Francisco now and loves it.
Yeah.
So what would make somebody your age live in Westland?
Yeah.
I mean, thinking the vision has been fulfilled. We've got these beautiful mixed use. We've got nice little shops and restaurants. What would make you live in Westland versus downtown? Because I said you could take the 35 to downtown
Yes.
if you wanted to go do that stuff. And Logan's like, well, he goes, maybe if I worked somewhere in Clackamas.
Yeah.
You know, so if it was a.
So where would you
community-
even live in the corridor though? That's
Yeah.
my question is where would you live?
Yeah,
There's
right.
nowhere for
But
him
I'm
to
saying
live.
the vision, if the vision.
To me, the vision is to have housing.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think the question is, again, it's not about whether or not you allow housing.
Yeah.
Or whether or not you want to build housing. You do.
Absolutely.
It's whether or not you reserve some land for commercial development along the frontage of Highway 43. And I'm not,
Yeah.
I mean, I do have an opinion on it, but I'm here to ask you all your opinion, not to tell you what my opinion is. My opinion sort of reflected up there that you have a minimum percentage. Doesn't have to be 50%, but I want to know what y'all think. I mean, I understand that,
Yeah.
hey, maybe that's never going to happen, but a lot of development codes, frankly, are built to avoid the worst thing.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what design standards are frankly all about
Mhm.
is, but
And-
again,
And we do have limited large parcels. I mean, we've got like, you know, the Robinwood Center that's got the Walmart, that's already all built out. It's going to be a while before somebody decides that they want to do something different there, I think. One area that I look at is the Bolton Fire Station.
Yeah.
The city
Right.
owns that. That could be a way to get something to happen there. And that would be something where maybe, you know, a corner market or something with housing adjacent to it, especially if it may be combined with the buildings across Failing. And, you know, so you're now dealing with a bigger lot that would make more financial sense.
I was gonna add, I don't mean to spoil, because this is the next, or one of the next slides, but we also have the requirement for the proposed requirement for minimum housing density. So by combining that requirement with this, that's effectively kind of almost ensuring that mixed use gets developed rather than just standalone residential versus.
So I have a question about that. That would make mixed use happen, or would it stop development from occurring on
I don't know that it would stop development from occurring, but it could be a it could be an impediment to development if somebody envisions and wants to just do one type of.
Maybe just to further clarify that there's a minimum residential density if you build residential, or you can't
Yeah,
even build.
if you know,
Okay.
if you build
So you
residential.
can build purely commercial.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right now it's, here's all the things you can build. You can build any of these things. And the question is, do we want to have a minimum requirement that at least part of the site be commercial and at least part of the site be, and or at least part of the site be residential? We've got that as sort of the flip side question.
The
Yeah.
developer in Gresham that did that apartment building said that he and his crew are anxious and hungry, and I had his name somewhere, but that would be somebody that maybe come around West Lynn and see what you think. I mean, he doesn't own anything here, but he's done several apartment mixed use buildings in Gresham.
And I think that makes it attractive for businesses to come. And that's what we need to do. We can no longer just be housing, because that's not helpful for the economy of the city. And so if you build it beautifully, that attracts them to come. This is the opportune time to start recruiting those businesses to come. They don't want to be in Portland anymore. They don't want to be in this area. This is a perfect, beautiful area. My daughter too would never move. I'm trying to convince her to, even if she could move to like Oswego. I'm like, come on. And she goes, Mom, I can't walk anywhere, and there's no nightlife. She goes, there's the nice restaurants are too fall apart, and I don't want to go in downtown in that kind of an area yet until that's secure. She lives in San Francisco. So for her to be worried about going into downtown Portland tells you something. So, it's kind of that theory. But again, the city of West Lynn, truly, we need to look at how do we attract business that will thrive off of a 24-hour availability. Those folks that live nice and close want to go pick up their dinner, go to the grocery store, go buy a book, 7, 8 o'clock at night, that kind of thing. Or I'm one of those people, I might want dessert 11 o'clock at night. And if there's a cafe or something open, absolutely, without a doubt. If it's close enough, especially if I can walk to it, absolutely, I'm there.
So I'm going to quickly summarize what I think I've heard so far and just see if there's additional thoughts. I think I've heard it is important to create opportunities for and get businesses to locate in this area. Like, that's important to provide those opportunities for people who might want to live here. It's also important to have additional housing that partly can support those businesses and bring additional folks to, make this a more vibrant place. That it does need to be a walkable place, or you won't have that kind of foot traffic that's going to help support those businesses. I think I've heard opinions on both sides of whether or not to require a certain amount of the ground floor frontage be devoted to commercial. One, I heard maybe it's not something we need to worry about, or maybe it's a bad idea to require that. I think on the flip side, I've heard, well, it's important to have it, and if we don't require it, maybe we won't have any. I'm just trying to summarize what I've heard. I'm almost done. And then I want to see if there's other thoughts. And then the last thing I'll mention is just, I heard it's important to have quality design. Like, whatever we have, quality and consistent design along the ground floor of the buildings, future buildings along the street. So any other thoughts? Yeah.
So when you were talking about the kind of develop, I was thinking like, under this code, what might a section of the corridor look like? Like, we could have a complete commercial building, and then next door we could have, one of these, on the corner we could have something like that with housing above and commercial below, and then the next we could have just commercial.
And we could have just housing.
Or just housing.
Too.
And just
Or 50% at this point.
I thought we did.
No, so 50% just means the ground floor, the bottom floor, 50% of it's not housing, but the other 50% can be housing. Or
And
whatever
up above could be
and up above
100% housing.
Yeah, it depends on whatever percentage. I'm just using the 50% that's in there now. And you could also, behind whatever's facing the street, so on a deeper lot, you can have housing back there too, or whatever. I mean, right now the code allows pretty significant flexibility in terms of the uses. And the only question, or there's several questions, but this question is just for the buildings, the ground floor of the buildings that are directly facing Highway 43, should some portion of that be required to be not housing? be required to be commercial, retail, et
Right.
cetera?
And that's our question.
And that's our question. That's this question. We've got like 3 more. We've got like,
And I'd say yes on that one if I
Yeah.
was to vote. After the discussion is like, okay, that's still, we're allowing a lot of housing on a lot.
yeah, I think the last thing I heard was maybe 50% is too high. Maybe we should dial that back. I don't know. I heard that from, I think, at least one person.
Yeah.
And also for a little more context, we did include a requirement that housing not be allowed on the corner of the building on 43, just because it typically a commercial business is going to be a lot more successful if it's on the corner.
That makes sense.
So we're
That's
really
for
just
sure.
trying to, we want mixed use and we're trying to direct where we think the community wants to see commercial, and we assume that is along 43. But still providing flexibility for it to be provided elsewhere.
So any other opinions or thoughts? And it's okay if we have a mix of opinions, we're gonna say something in here. We're gonna say, here's what we heard from our working group, and ultimately the planning commission and city council get to recommend and decide.
One other comment or question, just in light of the potential flexibility or inflexibility of future uses, is if you could talk a little bit about the extent to which, at least from the built perspective, the existing development in much of the corridor becomes non-conforming and can't be replicated in the future. And so there's a push-pull of, if you're gonna inhibit the rights of property owners to build what they built now, and then you're gonna make them build something different in the future.
So I guess a couple things. One, if it's there now, it gets to stay.
Sure.
It doesn't get to expand. You don't get to typically, I don't remember exactly what your code says about non-conforming uses in terms of the ability to expand a non-conforming use. But most codes say you can't make something, it's okay if something it was built previously and doesn't conform with the existing standards, that's okay. But you can't expand it or make it more non-conforming past a certain point. So in the case of uses, we do have we're not proposing to really change too many of the allowed uses. And so in terms of the use itself, I don't think we're going to have much of an issue with non-conforming uses. But then there's non-conforming development. So is the development that's there now, is it have a floor area ratio of less than 1? And again, that's okay too. In the future, if somebody's going to redevelop that site, well, then they need to meet the current or the proposed requirements. Same thing in terms of if somebody wants to, again, this really does get down to how your development code deals with non-conforming uses. So do you allow for, most codes say, if you just want to do an interior remodel, that's fine. You don't have to worry about those exterior design standards. Or if you want to expand your footprint by 20%, up to 20%, that's okay too. You don't have to go back and rebuild your entire parking lot. So most codes, and your code, I think, is not an exception, have those kind of provisions so that you're not really, yes, you're creating a situation where you could have some non-conforming development, but in most cases, it's okay. It's just more about if you redevelop the site or expand the use or the building by more than a certain percentage, then yes, somebody would have to come along and meet these new requirements. And so that does have an impact or a cost to development for sure, but it doesn't mean that places that are there now can't stay, So does that answer your question?
Makes sense to me. I just want to make sure the group all understands that.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, there's kind of tend to be 3 different types of non-conformity. This is getting real down in the weeds, but non-conforming uses. So the use is not allowed anymore. Non-conforming development, you've got a building that's not built to the current design standards, or non-conforming lot where the lot's not as big as it needs to be to meet a minimum lot size or something like that. That's not going to be much of an issue in this case because we don't have those, but that can, in some places, that's an issue. So yeah, some real deep planner there. All right. Any other thoughts on this one before we go to the next one? And again, I think we heard kind of a diversity of opinions, but also some consistent opinion on what we're trying to achieve, So.
I just think it's interesting that all of our 20-something young adults, none of them want to live in Westland, daughter included.
I was just thinking about, I was reflecting that in my own head. Maybe that's okay too, because we also have to determine what are we as a community? Are we the young nightlife community, or are we the community that they say, we're done with that part of our life. Now we want to have kids. We want to be in good schools. We want to walk to the river. We want to go to MS Young. We don't want too much. We want a suburban feel. So I just screwed everything together,
So
But
that's a good point, but currently, my understanding is West Lynn's residential tax base doesn't support the services needed in the city. So you need more.
Well, single family.
Mhm,
Multifamily is a different calculation.
Yeah, but you need more of that vibrancy of people
Commercial
coming.
activity.
Yes, to be able to support that. So you actually probably need a little bit more than what we have. Maybe not yet. Maybe we don't want.
Yeah, I mean, I get excited about being able to walk places and do things, but I only wanted to go this far because I don't want anyone to come down in my neighborhood and the deer and everything else and like walk to the river and blah, 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 blah.
Well, I mean, I will say in pretty much every meeting we had, people said, we want better facilities to walk. Like that was very clearly stated in all the community meetings.
I mean, I have no problem walking 10 miles a day right now
All right.
and
Wait,
seeing everything beautiful.
Yes, we go to the next slide. Okay.
Sorry.
That's so we started talking about this one already a little bit. So again, we have incorporated a number of standards related to the design of buildings. And we've had some conversation just today about, the importance of design in terms of consistent feel on the ground floor or creating something that looks, what word did you use?
Continuity.
Yeah, continuity and also
But you
just
said like solid or something
Solid,
like that.
you know,
Oh,
Sort of
yeah,
your-
yeah, like it's
design
like,
that-
like you don't want,
Substantial.
you don't
Substantial.
want glass siding down to the ground.
Yeah.
You don't want a house build.
Yes. So we've
Yeah.
kind of heard some comments about that already. We sent this draft to our technical advisory group, and we did hear from one or two folks that said, wow, there's a lot of standards, and maybe, if you have too many standards, then you're creating barriers to development or increasing costs of development. So we just want to kind of ask the question at a high level, should we be prioritizing attractive design or development flexibility, or somewhere in the middle, I guess, and just, think about, yes, if you go too far on the design requirement side, it does start to increase the cost and feasibility of development, or increase the cost and reduce the feasibility. At the same time, providing fairly consistent design standards gives you more control to make sure you're kind of addressing what people say they want to see. And we have heard in community meetings that sort of aesthetically pleasing or visually pleasing design is important to people. So, but we did want to put that question out there generally to you. So any thoughts on this? Anything anybody hasn't expressed?
Not in addition.
Yeah.
Well, my thought on this is having design standards. The flip to that is that it might make it more attractive to develop because that developer understands, oh, someone else who builds next to my first development is going to meet my standards, and so I'm more likely to succeed in the long run because they have these standards in place.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I think about.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this one? I mean, I'd say what we've heard previously is it is important to, if we're going to kind of land on one end of the spectrum or the other, prioritizing attractive design is the right end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Maybe not at 100%, but somewhere between 50 and 80 or something like that. Side of the
I think
side of the
that
spectrum.
makes sense. If you have, it's too rigid, too strict, then you're probably going to have developers that are going to go, I'm not going to bother. But I think that we need to design requirement so that the end product is something that we all kind of would like to see.
And people want to live in. We're talking
Yeah.
about building housing.
Yeah.
It's something that will age well too. I mean, this is something that
Yeah.
a lot of developers, I think, miss out on and they go cheap. But like, again, these little cottages, they're being built cheap, which is all cute and sweet and they look good now. But when you've got 3 or 4 cars outside of each one and there's not ample parking and that product has not aged well and it's a lesser able financial person to take care of things, they go down fast. You'll see these communities that will look awful in 10 years.
Durability of materials.
Yeah, yeah. So if this is for the long haul, put some standards in there.
All right, I think we get pretty good consensus on this one. All right. So this is kind of flip side of the commercial requirement discussion. So there's kind of what we're asking here is should there be kind of a threshold for residential density if someone is building housing along the corridor. So right now, what we have in the code is for developments or properties over ½ acre in size that there is a minimum density requirement of 40 units per acre, which 40 units per acre, we could show you some kind of examples of what that looks like. It's kind of that's more dense than just a townhouse development. That's more like an apartment building.
And I don't know.
Multifamily.
I'm personally, I don't know.
So I don't know what the right.
Yeah.
You said
I think a ½ acre, 40 units, that's full on
No,
apartment.
that would be 20 units on a ½ acre.
Yeah, 20.
40 units per
Okay.
acre.
Per acre.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again,
Better.
that would be sort of, it would
Yeah.
be 20 units on it.
Oh, I see.
Matt, can I ask a question? So if there's a minimum housing requirement, then could a property be strictly, fully commercial? Or would it then, if there's minimum,
This is kind of back to Steve's question. This is not you have to build housing at this
But if you do,
density, but
do.
if you do, then it needs to
Yeah.
be denser housing.
Yeah.
Or units per acre.
and then, then we would support higher density.
Okay, so it's like 10 units per ½ acre. No,
no.
No,
20 units per ½ acre.
Yeah,
that's
so
a lot.
so the ½ acre is the threshold
That's a lot of
above
units.
which you'd apply it,
I think it is
so
too.
What does that mean? Like how many square footage is that?
Especially if there's 20 different living units.
Yeah, how many square
So
footage?
it just
how much-
depends on, it
Standard
depends on the
lot.
height, it depends on the number of stories, it depends on how much of the
It's
building.
1,000 square foot lot is a 1/4 acre.
Okay.
No, but what's the fair square footage of each unit?
It depends on how many stories the building is,
Right.
how much of we should have brought you some pictures to
We
show you.
do have some examples from the previous presentation, and those slides are hidden on this one, so you could just unhide that and go to that, because we did talk about it last time.
What do you mean on high?
So
On
if you,
the presentation?
yeah, so
Yeah,
if
you'd
you
have
go
to
out
kinda
of
escape out.
presentation mode, so just click like escape.
Oh.
Yeah. escape,
And then
scroll
go
to the
bottom.
bottom.
So my
So that
son in San
example right
Francisco
there.
rents,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's just a different
he's got a
ownership.
1-bedroom apartment in a high-rise building on the 9th floor, because if you go much higher, it's
This
Or we
kind
could
of
just
28
leave
floors.
it here.
building, but the higher you go, the more expensive it is.
Yeah.
And
Um,
is it just this one slide, or do we have?
he thinks that we're kind of old-fashioned and that we think everybody should be a homeowner. Now, I know that's your business, you want everybody to be a homeowner, but he thinks that that's an old-fashioned way to think. And he says the reason people want to move out of their crappy apartments into a house that they own is because apartments are crappy. He goes, but if you live in a nice apartment, he goes, the cost of living in the apartment is not more necessarily than a mortgage, and then you can invest other money in a mutual fund, and you'll do way better than even what you earn in equity on your
It's
house.
a whole new ballgame.
I have that argument.
This is a young person's
Yeah.
view, and this, my son also has maxed out his 401k and his, everything every year. He's 28, he's gonna retire early, but, he loves it.
And then I'll go buy a house.
So just kind of back to this minimum density
Yeah.
question. So this was from, as Brandon said, a previous presentation where we talked about this before. So this is just a couple of examples. We could bring or send you other examples. So these are both multi-story developments. So the one on the right, top right, they're both on the right, but the top one is in Lake Oswego in the Weiser block. That is about 86 units per acre. So that's double the density of the minimum that we included in the code. So if you took at least one story off of that, you'd still be above that threshold.
And that's attractive. I mean, and they're not tiny units up there either.
They're well built.
And then the bottom one is much, much higher than what we're describing. That's 4/1. That's 4 stories of residential over ground floor commercial. So when you start, that's why I say, the size of the density, the size of the unit, or size of the units that gets you that density, it really depends on how many floors of development you have. So that one's 183 about.
The 40 is like nothing.
40 is not super.
Like it's not the
high.
minimum.
It's
pretty loose.
yeah.
I would say for multi-unit or multi-family development for apartments, 40 is not super high. Like
Okay.
you could probably build you could probably get 40 on even a 2-story walk-up if the units were relatively small and you weren't devoting more than a certain percentage of the site to parking.
I was gonna say on a half acre, it would basically probably just look like townhomes, like from a
Yeah,
build perspective.
From a build perspective.
Like it'd be 10 units of townhomes or 20.
Yeah. I mean, somebody mentioned Division Street. I could show you all kinds of examples from Division Street that are anywhere from 40 to 100,
Yeah.
So it just depends on how much of the lot's covered and how tall the building is and how small the units are.
Well, I'd rather give like developers more flexibility on that
Yeah.
and less on the design.
Mhm.
And if we're talking about different requirements.
And doesn't have to be 40, that we felt like was sort of wasn't so low that you wouldn't get
the housing.
the housing that you're trying to get, and it wasn't so high that it's unachievable or not feasible for some reason. And we did want it would only be applied if the lot is bigger than a half acre. So if it's below a half acre, you wouldn't have to meet this requirement because it's harder to meet the requirement for a smaller property. That's where the half acre comes
Yeah.
in.
And the place that I got to see in Gresham, it was mostly studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms. And the builder said if he were doing it again, he would have put more 3 bedrooms in because there's more demand for 3-bedroom apartments.
Mhm.
For now.
Yeah, and these are all
Change.
these are all market rate
My
apartments.
children would have children.
Yeah,
Trying to think of
They're expensive.
my own house.
children, yeah.
And another reason to encourage some minimum density is because if the city does want some mixed use and some commercial there, it's important to have more residential than enough to actually support the
Yeah.
commercial businesses that are right there on site. So that's
Go downstairs, get your coffee and croissant in the morning and go to the bookstore next door and.
Yeah. So what do people think? Is it a good idea to have kind of this minimum density requirement? 40 seem reasonable, or would you recommend something different?
Going for the long term, I think it seems reasonable.
Especially with the design factors in there that, they could do it well.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Now we can go back up to where we live.
I think that was the last one.
Was?
Yeah.
Oh, hi. Gosh. Okay. I mean, a lot of stuff, again, we talked about and gotten your feedback on before, and we just had kind of this limited number of things that have come up during the course of updating the mixed-use zoning code, and wanted to get your feedback. But if anybody had any other comments or questions, having read through what we sent out in advance, we're happy to talk about those things. But beyond just kind of next steps, I'll cover those real quick. This is sort of our general. Is this been updated? Oh yeah, okay. So that's today. Okay, over there is kind of next step. So our next step, kind of on our end, is to produce a final draft of the mixed-use zoning provisions. And then also last time we talked to you, we showed you some kind of snapshots of what the corridor plan itself looks like. So we've been continuing to work on that and update that and add information to that. We added a little bit of information in there, for instance, about that transportation planning rule analysis. I talked about the impact on the highways for the highway. And then we're planning on community open house or open houses in January and February, and then going through the adoption process after that in the spring of 2026. So that's kind of where we're headed. So in the next month or so, we're really just kind of getting the documents ready to go and then going out and talking to the community and then adoption process. So now I'll stop and just see if y'all have any other
Can
comments
you
or
guys
thoughts.
pull up the boundary line slide?
Sure.
I just have one thought comment, and you guys might have already done that.
You just let it go out. And go over the top.
And this is coming off of Carol's comment about having something butt up against your backyard. Are the lines drawn to where you basically draw them on a street so that the dividing line, there's a street between development and residential?
It's more on a property line, I believe.
Yeah, in most of these cases, it's on the property line because we focused on the properties that already have commercial zoning on them or already have a commercial use on them. And so the commercial zoning really in most of these cases is just where it's in place. It applies to the properties that are adjacent to Highway 43, and it doesn't go all the way back to the street behind those. So the boundaries of the focus areas, in some cases it does, but in the boundaries of the focus areas, in some of those cases, we did kind of take those all the way to the nearest street. Not everywhere, but in some cases we did.
Yeah,
But it's kind of phase one.
Phase one is the blue dot.
Is the blue dashes, and so in some cases they go to a street, but in a lot of cases they don't go to the back of the property.
God, I'd almost love to see VU Drive be included in that all the way over. And I say that just because, although there is a big discrepancy there in the topography, but if you could avoid actually allowing somebody to build a 30-foot something right up to your property, if you have a street in between you and the development, it makes it a lot more palatable. So I just maybe where it can be done, maybe include, and especially like View Drive, a lot of those houses are smaller houses that could be absorbed into that building area and actually
And
create
if you start getting
Something more.
people,
better.
when there's opportunity, if people can start accumulating multiple lots. to do something bigger.
Exactly. And that's the zone, rather than have this commercial building, now you got this little empty house, you got this big thing. These guys just lost any value versus taking it to the street, incorporating that into that whole zone, and then these guys across the street. It's a little bit easier to look out your front door and have a street in between you.
Yeah, and I think that was some of our thinking when we were looking at these focus area boundaries the last couple of times we talked to you all about it. And so we have kind of shifted that perspective a little bit in terms of what's being proposed to be rezoned in this first phase.
Yeah.
But the assumption is that then there will be some additional rezoning subsequent to this for those properties in a lot of cases, which do go back to kind of the next street. But I mean, I appreciate the comment.
Yeah,
I
I'm looking at that. I would
totally get it.
try to end your boundary line.
Yeah, at a street where
Rather than a
we
property
get.
line. Yeah. I think you're gonna have a lot more buy-in from the community if that is taken into consideration.
Yeah.
So you're gonna do this thing in January, right? Or whatever it is, like the open house. Is that just gonna be an open house that's gonna present phase one, or are you presenting phase one and two?
Well, we're gonna present the
change.
corridor plan, and we're gonna show people these maps that show them, here are the larger focus areas, but here's the areas where we are proposing the rezoning occur as part of phase one, and let them know that there will be a subsequent phase to look at rezoning in the areas, the remaining areas within the focus areas, and we'll present the types of standards like we've been talking to you all about that would be applied in the phase one areas for now. And also we'll, talk about the pedestrian and bicycle improvements and just, all the things that are kind of embedded in the plan up to this point. So kind of both, but what we're going to, again, this is the plan at the moment, is to say, for this phase, for this adoption process, the proposal is to adopt the plan, as a vision or our plan, and also to adopt zoning in the phase one areas.
Right. I'm just saying, are you going back to the community once it comes to phase two?
Oh yeah, that's part of the point.
That's kind of what I'm wondering.
Yeah, that's in fact, that is
Okay.
in fact why,
Okay.
a big reason of why we're just proposing adopting the zoning in those phase one areas, is so that there's more opportunity to have more conversation with people in the remaining areas about, should that zoning in those kind of phase two areas, the edges, should it look exactly like what we're proposing in the phase one areas, or should it look a little different? Should it be more of a transitional kind of zoning? And so, and we want to have, the city wants to have more conversations with folks about that.
I think that's
I mean, I
great.
think that was the concern about applying this zoning for the entire area.
Yeah, it's kind of drastic if you just go right into it.
So yeah, absolutely. There would be going back to the public for more discussion
and
about that, for sure.
Being able to talk about, alleviate the concerns in the more residential areas.
Yeah, the areas that are more sort of transitional now.
And then what will be the timeline for the feedback and how that affects this group here?
Well, so we're not planning to have this is supposed to be the last meeting with y'all as a group, but we'd love to have you keep looking at what we're doing. Like, we'll definitely keep, sending you information. And so we just aren't planning to have another meeting where we all get together. But the timing would be, we have a community meeting or two in January and February. We'd let you know what we heard, and then we would move into a process of having work sessions and then hearings with the planning commission first, and then with the council. And so we would let them know what we heard at the community meetings. And when I say we, Lynn and Chris, Steve, have been talking to the planning commission and council about this project for the last, since we've been working on it, and talking through some of these same questions around different types of development standards and letting them know where we were. And so there will be additional work sessions to sort of say, here's where we are now, and here's what's being proposed for adoption, and what do you think? And here's what we heard from the community at those open houses, and here's what we heard from the working group during our last meeting with them. And then if you have other thoughts, like, let us know. Again, we're not going to have another formal meeting with this, but we're happy to hear from
And everybody, of course, is welcome to go to planning commission meeting.
We would encourage you.
And the hearing.
Yeah.
I'm the liaison to planning commission too, and sometimes I sit there and I'm the only person in the room. And when we were talking about the waterfront, there were people in the room, and somebody's like, I'm surprised there's not more people here. And I said, I'm surprised there's more people than me here.
Yeah, I would.
And then you have a hearing and nobody shows up.
Yeah, I would strongly echo.
And then we complain about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, typically, we don't know how government works.
But I will say I've been to the Robinwood neighborhood meeting, and there are kind of a new group of people, not really new, but they've been there, historically, and now all of a sudden they're back because of the car wash proposal on Highway 43. And there are a significant number of people that are like, I don't know anything about this. And people that, and I've said, hey, here's the website, here's all the meetings that we've had, look on, and they're like, well, somebody should come and tell me. And so there are people that think that we should go door to door and share this vision.
Or drive a billboard around town. Like, what do you mean?
As part of phase one, is there any attempt to fast track sidewalks across the highway?
I mean, I think the reality is
Crosswalks.
that process will take time, because it's something you're going to have to coordinate with the state, because the state owns the highway.
We have a new tax.
But
Maybe.
I'm
So-
gonna get killed one of these days.
I mean, I think there's really strong support for
You are
the
brave.
pedestrian crossings, for sure. And so, they will be in the plan, and then I can't
know.
really say that
There are some safety issues that
Oh,
I
yeah,
think are really
absolutely.
paramount.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, to try and get your
agree.
ride your bike along 43, which I was without a car for 2 weeks. And there are construction vehicles in the bike lanes.
Yeah,
Bike lanes are covered with leaves. You can't even see the bike lanes.
yeah.
To me, these are safety issues
Yeah.
that I would like to see rise to the top of
Yeah.
a
I appreciate the comment.
plan.
You know,
The good
and we
news-
can certainly reflect those comments, you know, when we talk to planning commission and council. And Lynn's heard you
Do you
say
have any
that.
more meetings with the technical advisory group?
We don't have any more meetings scheduled with them, but we have been sending them the things that we've been talking to you about and asking them to weigh in on those things. So for instance, we sent all of them the current draft of the mixed use code, and we asked a few people who were particularly knowledgeable and had opinions about that earlier on to please look at this and give us your comments. So we've been getting comments from them. The folks who are on the advisory group who are transportation folks, we sent them that transportation planning rule analysis memo and said, please tell us what you think about that. We got comments back from ODOT on that. I don't know that we got comments from Metro or DLCD on that. So we've been, rather than having a meeting with that whole group, we've been checking in with them in kind of subsets and individually and as a group in terms of sending stuff to all of them.
Because
But
it's hard
then
to get all of them
it's
together.
hard, yeah. And frankly, you know, if we want to talk to them about transportation issues in particular, there's half of them that don't
Yeah.
care or this is not their bailiwick, you know, and then there's half of them who really care a lot. And same thing with some of the development code stuff, you know, so we've really, and they've been good about responding and saying, yes, we'll be happy to look at this. We will get you comments. And so that's how we've been working with them on this last bit of stuff. Yeah, question.
Well, I want to say that this process has been excellent.
Thank you.
I appreciate that when I think back to the surveys and where we are now, like that you really worked hard to reflect in the plan and then listen to us to try to reflect that in the plan. I mean, I feel like what we've created addresses what's wanted from the community. So I hope it's received that way. I'm sure there'll be some pushback, but you know, there always is. But you know, hopefully it's received that way. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Well, we want to thank you for participating and sticking with us. It's a long time and a lot of technical stuff and a lot of concepts you have to kind of, you know, tackle, work your way through, but your input has been really valuable, and please stay engaged and continue to provide any additional insight you have.
We would love to see you at planning commission and council meetings if you want to be there. You've got it.
And tell your friends and neighbors so that they can't say I never heard of this.
It's not really that. It's just they don't care until they care.
Until it is.
Yeah.
Once they see a picture, that's when they care.
And
But you-
today, you might get 20 minutes of your day back.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not too mad about it.
Comment?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry about
That's why.
I have to tell you, so Christine Lewis just shared a report about apparently something happened on 43 between Oswego and Bellwood, and they have
Oh,
a
yeah.
news report of a gentleman
that's
trying to
right.
ride
Oh,
on basically 43.
yeah, the biker.
Yes,
But what I understand, she hit a rock, she fell, and then a car hit her.
right. But this guy was the report
ahead,
shows
Rob.
the guy is
Oh.
trying, this other person is trying
One
to
sec.
ride 43, and he goes, I have to get off my
muted,
bike and
though.
walk this way too, Jane.
Oh, I won't go on.
Yeah, and so at least.
Oh, you know what?
Riverside.
Hold on, Bo's got some comment here.
It's not that important. I was just going to say that you've done a lovely job, and I really like this plan. And the people who hate it the most will wait till the very, 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 very last minute before they come and tell you that it's horrible and change everything. It's just the way life works. So you did a great job.
Ignore that population.
Thank you, Bo.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
We're going to close the meeting.